In this video, we're going to start working on the basic UI tip calculator. The UI is already laid out, and just to kind of review a little bit, I set the constraints up on this already. I took the first constraint, which is the text input layout, and remember on it, it's actually two controls in one. You should make sure you pick the top one. I just constrained it to the top and the edges, gave it a little bit of padding, and then everything else is based off of this. So my radio group is pinned to the bottom of the text amount, a little bit of gutter to the sides. Then the button, I've centered it on up and down this way and between this edge and there, and then tip amount is tied to center on the screen and then tied to the bottom of this. So everything lays out nice no matter how big or small it is. And again, not trying to review all of that. There are other videos earlier in this series for that. What I do want to cover is one more property before we get into writing code. And it's a property that I haven't covered yet because it didn't really make much difference when you're just laying out your UI. But before you write code, you do need to make sure that you've given an ID to everything on the screen that you might reference in code. Now, if you've put a control on there and it's, or something, and it's decorative only and the value will never ever change, or you'll never need to reference it in code, you don't need to give it an ID. But if you want to refer to it in code, you do. So for example, put this first one here, and again, I want to make sure, you just got to be very careful on these text input layouts that of what we're referencing, right? So there's the input layout, which is the whole thing, but the inside is actually the part that the user will type values into. So I want to make sure that I have that inner one selected because we need to get the value the customer entered or the user entered. So I'll select it and I want to give it an ID. To do that, I just come up here and give it an ID. Typically, you will start the name with the type of control it is. You don't have to do it this way, but pretty much everybody does. Or at least everybody does. And it's so that when you're looking at it in code, you know what you're dealing with. So in this case, I might call it text input. And I probably wouldn't bother with text input edit text. That's a little long, but I just call it text input and then what? This is the total amount or bill amount or whatever you want to call it. But the important thing is give it a name, and we'll need to remember the name for later. So the name's in here, so that's saved. Other things, I'm going to have to see what percent, right? I need to know which one of these were selected. Oh, and in my UI, I actually forgot to default one. Let's do that now. There we go. So I'll come in here again, radio button, and what am I going to call it? Well, this is 10%, 15%, 20%, so I think radio button 10, 15, and 20 are pretty good names. So I'll make sure I select those, and you can see here it updates them also. Having a little mouse trouble. 20. Okay, there we go. The button, we are going to have to, so we won't ever change the value of the button, but we do need to write code to respond when the button is clicked. So because of that, we're going to need to find the button at runtime. And you'll notice on a lot of these, it does give you a default value, but you don't want to use the default value because if I have like 6 buttons, button 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 won't make any sense. So in this case, we'll call it button compute. And then, sorry, my mouse keeps dying. I don't know what's going on. There we go. And so then the last one is this little text view, which is just a, it's a label on the screen, but this is where we will update the amount. Oh, and the other thing to notice is down here I used the little wrench text so that it shows tip amount so I can find it on the screen, but at runtime it starts blank. So anyway, we'll call it text view tip amount. And there we go. So they all have names. So these are important. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here. We're actually ready to start writing code, and I'll do that on the next video.